I know you've worked across publishers. You've done a lot of different types of comics, including manga.
Yeah.
Now, what's your favorite type of comic to work on between manga and Americanized comics, and why?
Well, when I work in Attack on Titan Anthology, the good thing was that it was, even though it was based on the manga, like we had the ability to kind of like adapt it to our style. So it was fun to kind of like find that balance between those two, like what I wanted to do and kind of like the language that the book already had. So I think it's pretty much the same. Like it doesn't, like, it depends on the story. I usually like stories where I can get to play with like a different world and like, you know, world building. So like it's just gonna depend on the story and less on the format, I guess, of what, yeah.
Okay, because I know that like you've done, what is it, We Are Robin,
yes.
And then you've done the Attack on Titan Anthology,
yeah.
And also Number One with a Bullet.
Yes.
Now all three have very interesting and distinct styles.
Yeah.
Now, how do you switch from art style yet still keep your style, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no. So what I like to do is, like, depending on the freedom I have with the book, I like to come up with a specific visual language that will adapt to the story of the book and then try to make the look of the book unique, not only from what you might expect from a book in whatever genre you're working about, like also from different books that I've worked on. So like Number One with a Bullet was mostly like a thriller, and it was like more about like a social commentary and stuff like that. So like the art style that I had for Attack on Titan, or even for like We Are Robin, that was more action based and was more like, you know, the drama was in a different place. Didn't feel like it suited the book, so like I tried to adapt a little bit more, depending on what the project I'm working on. And the other thing is that I do like to abstract and stylize more than I like to go realism. So like, depending on the flexibility, I guess, of the story, I like to go push one way or the other.
With your art styles, especially Number One with a Bullet, I noticed that at some moments you'll take really interesting, like, obscured angles, but then other times they're very direct and straightforward.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to do those angles and when to like kind of reel it back?
Yeah, well, that's going to depend with the beat of the story. Like if it's a conversation, the drama is more on the words and the words on the conversation that's happening, then I just let that be the protagonist. If it's the situation, if it's like Number One with a Bullet got a lot psychedelic in some points, because just like the inner struggle kind of like became part of the world outside of the main character. So like the way I tried to distort the locations and the environment of where their character was, that was going to depend on the level of stress of the main character. Like, so like if it was a very tense moment, I like to do those obscure and kind of like play more with like perspective and like abstracting and like and distorting perspective. And when it was just more of a tense conversation between two characters, I tried to be more, like you said, like straightforward, and try to accentuate more like the characters' expressions and like how they interact, and maybe tiny details like the way, you know, a glance was portrayed or something like that. So that was my main concern.
I love your style, because one of the things I really noticed that was so cool is that with this you're able to convey like the character's emotions, so much so that like words aren't really needed.
Yeah, well, it was fun. I was working with Jake Saman, who was the writer for Number One with a Bullet. That was our second book together. And the way, since we had the experience of working on Goners, which was our first book together, we tried to basically structure the creative process in a way that we both could take, you know, what we were better at. So he gave me scripts that were basically he works mostly for television, so he works mostly for script writing for television. So he gave me scripts that read more like a TV script and like didn't have the layout of the pages or like panels and stuff like that. And then I would take those scripts and then do the layouts and everything based on that. And that way I could set the visual storytelling, the pace of the visual storytelling as I saw fit. And then we kind of like went back and forward and make sure that the final product, you know, got the best of both angles, I guess.
Between all these projects that you've worked on, because you've done manga, you've done Americanized comics, you've done all sorts of things, is there one in particular that has stood out to you as being your favorite to work on, and why?
Funny enough, like every time that I get to do more animated action. I think I like the most. I've had the opportunity to work in a couple of like Adventure Time based properties, and then that's always fun because like the abstraction of the characters is there. I can take it as far as I want, taking it closer to what my style would be, and just that kind of animated feel, like that's always, I love animation, and like I grew up mostly like, I even grew up watching animation, and then that's what got me into comics. So like that animated feel, like that's always something that I want to bring into my comic pages. And I think like those kind of stories, when I can get more abstracted and more animated in the action and the storytelling, those are always my favorite.
Now, I know you got a couple projects coming up, or at least one.
Yeah.
Would you like to let readers know what to keep looking out for?
Yeah, for sure. So my next project is MIDDLEWEST. Is Scotty Young is writing it, and it's a fantasy story, coming of age story to set in a fantasy Midwest. It's called, that's the Middle West part, and it's the story about this kid who's trying to break a cycle of kind of like a distorted family dynamic, and it's going to set him in a quest through the Middle West, and where he's going to learn not only about himself but about like his family, and again, it's a coming of age story, and it's full of like, Scotty has done a wonderful job of creating like very magical and fantastic elements, but rooted in that kind of like Midwest aesthetic and Midwest setting, and I'm just really happy with the world that we're coming up with in MIDDLEWEST.